So I'm currently walking to my car from class, and it occurred to me that all of our research, Kevin, Summer, and my research for our capstone projects, interlock in a way that I feel like if it were a collective, it could actually be called Voices, since Kevin's work is based on spoken word poetry, and Summer's work is based on, you know, the voice and the influence that people bring to their work based on their heritage and their culture. And since my work is based on giving a voice to people within the department, the students within the department, and kind of seeing how they feel about everything. So this is just like a random musing that I had. Yeah, and it kind of like inspired me a little bit, that kind of catching that thread, seeing that we all are discussing like the voice of an artist. Hello everyone. Hopefully you will excuse my appearance. I've been sick all weekend, actually since like Thursday. Yay, thank you Michigan for changing the weather on me. I love it. No, I don't. So today's vlog, I was asked to last week create a vlog of my own, and then to develop 3 questions that my peers would then answer, and I had to review their work and answer their questions. So the first person whose work I looked at was Summer, and she's working on a research project on sorry, my head's a little foggy. She's working on a research project basically about Arab American theater works. And she's kind of researching works that have been done that bring light to that culture, and what it's like kind of being an Arab American. And she's researching different playwrights. So, so one of the, from looking at her resources, one of the things that I liked was she had, one of the artists that she was looking at was Betty, I hope I'm saying this right, Betty Shamia. And in the interview that she had a link to, Shamia had said, oh geez, I'm getting ahead of myself in my notes here. Sorry, foggy brain. Okay, backtrack. So the first thing is, with the recordings that Summer had done, with the recordings that she had done, her voice recordings on her blog, I had a really hard time hearing her. There was like, I don't know if it was like some crinkling or like tapping or drumming or something going on in the background. So I had a really hard time focusing on her words and what she was saying about her project. So I didn't get 100% of everything that she said. So again, I'm sorry. I did the best I could. But one of the things that I really liked that she had said was, she said, I think she was referring to this Betty Shamia when she was talking about this, but she said, I had written in quotes, should be able to be exactly who we want to be and not be condemned for it in any way. And I really liked that because I thought it was definitely relatable to what I'm working on, because a lot of the students in the department aren't able to 100% be themselves. They have to kind of lead a double life or a false life in order to fit in to what the theater department wants them to be, so that they will either be cast or be given designs, and they have to fit into this mold. It's true that theater is a collaborative art, and that you have to sacrifice parts of your vision to accept parts of other people's visions. But as an artist, you shouldn't have to compromise your true self. And I think that's what Summer is going for here when she says, you know, you should be exactly who you want to be and not be condemned for it. So I really agreed with that. Um, and I like what she had said. I think this was in her previous week. I went back and looked back at some of her other stuff. She said, theater can connect to all aspects of life, build stronger communities through creativity for people to express their ideas and have a voice within important issues and raise awareness to challenges they may be facing. I like that because obviously that definitely relates to the work that I'm doing. Um, I'm, you know, trying to give these people a voice, and it's important to have that voice. And I think definitely one of the great things about theater is that it can increase communication and give a platform to things that maybe aren't necessarily talked about. Even like, and this obviously doesn't relate to the culture that Summer's working on, but even with shows like Rent, AIDS was not something that was typically talked about. And it was brought to light, and even Tony Kushner in AIDS Angels of America had brought, you know, something similar to light with the AIDS, and that it can be a vocal tool to make people less afraid and more aware, and to bring knowledge to people so that I think, you know, when presented with something new that we don't understand, our first gut reaction is fear, fear of the unknown. And I think through theater, we're able to make connections and bring information to people in such a way, since it is entertainment, that doesn't feel like we're shoving it down their throats, and that it's easily accepted, and it helps to kind of recede that first reaction of fear. And like she said, art as a vocal tool. It's definitely a vocal tool. Um, and she said, you know, something about positive responses, and I definitely agree. I think, you know, engaging and encouraging people to get involved, it definitely engages and encourages people to get involved, and I think that through, um, I definitely think that, like, through my, I'm sorry, again, foggy head. Um, I definitely think that through my project and this form of art that I'm creating with this video and these interviews that I'm conducting, that it is kind of encouraging people to get involved, because within the politics of our department, we as students actually don't have much of a say other than, you know, the opportunity that we had last year to get involved in the questions, the like debate, I can't remember what the heck they called it, like the forum about John Wolfe as our chair. Students don't typically get a venue to discuss how they feel about who's representing them and to really put their hat in about who's representing them. And it's obviously been proven, because despite all of the things that were said in favor of removing John Wolfe from the department from many, many students, he is our chair once again. So it's obviously clear that now more than ever we need to have that platform to speak. And it was a little bit disappointing seeing, I mean, I was encouraged seeing that 13 people came out, but again, disappointing that one student already retracted their statement, and that I wasn't able to get more support from faculty or from students within the BFA program. So, I mean, it's interesting how we can put on a play and have these talkbacks and get, you know, all these amazing discussions, and we can put on a play and analyze every aspect of this play and create a dialogue, within the room where we're creating a play, like a production meeting, and discuss like all of these little things about the play and what this means or this might mean, and have this really open discussion like with a director. And yet within our own department, we're unable to have these open discussions about our education and what's really going on underneath the surface. We're kind of glossed over and just looking at like a pretty picture, and the performance and the visual aspect of it all. It's not really gone in depth about, in my opinion. And as students, we don't really have access to viewing all of those things. But sorry, back to Summer and her work. One of the things I liked that Shamia had said in her interview was talking about solo performance and how it relates to storytelling and vulnerability. And, excuse me. I definitely feel like in conducting these interviews one-on-one with these students, it is a vulnerability thing. It's these students having to come out and speak their truth and speak, what is exactly going on with them and why they feel the way they do about the department and kind of what they like about the department. And then I have to try and figure out a way to change all of it. And it is a little daunting knowing that, they could get in trouble for speaking out. But something kind of beautiful about the way I was conducting these interviews and the way that this open discussion had come out with the majority of the people that I had interviewed, was that they were very truthful, and that though there were similarities in how each student felt about the department, each story was unique, and each story had its own reason as to why. And I think that what that shows me about the department is that you can't treat all students the same. I mean, sure, we all want equality across the board, but the way that our program is speaks to, how do I word this? The way that our program is currently structured supposedly speaks to the majority and helps the majority. But through conducting these interviews, I figured out that in actuality, there is no majority. Each student that we have in our department is so different that by creating a program which speaks to the majority, you're actually creating a program that doesn't speak to anyone, is kind of like what I'm figuring out. Sorry, again, off topic. And I like that Shamia had also said, time limits make a writer really prioritize what is essential that they do express. This just makes me think, it's totally off topic here, but makes me think about something that we're actually doing in my musical theater performance class. We have to look at the song that we're performing from the show we're performing and write it out kind of like a monologue and figure out our objectives throughout the song, and for the end of each, objective section, we have to come up with an action verb, and it has to be like one word that sums up all of the action that we're trying to do within that stanza. And I think that that is really true about, work, as far as being a playwright or being a poet or really doing any type of art, is that when you're on limited time, both, like us working on these projects and like us having time here on Earth, you set, or, setting goals for yourself, it makes you prioritize what it is you want to say. And I think there's beauty in that because it creates more meaning the lesser words you use, the more you have to use your brain to kind of connect the story. One of the questions I had asked my interviewees was, if you could sum up the department in one word, what would it be? And one of the words that came up most often was disappointing. And I think that that's a really good word to sum up the department, first off. And second off, I think it's a really good question because it asks why. Out of all of the words in the English dictionary, and there are like so many that I can't even, like, there's like more than a million, obviously. Um, there's so many words. To pick that one word and for them to feel that that describes our department makes you question why. Why is that the one word they chose? Out of all of the words they could have chosen, several words that are similar to it, or several words that, like they could be angry at the department, they could be this, they could be that, but really they're disappointed in the department. And I just feel like that describes everything. It gives you this whole trajectory of their experience with the department in one word. And I think that's helpful and interesting. Okay, but now on to the questions Summer had asked. She asked, are there any other ideas I should be exploring that I haven't done yet in my research so far that you can think of? For me, I would have liked to have seen more of how the community response to seeing works about the culture she's exploring. And uh, I okay, I'd like to see more about how the community responds, like the community of Arab Americans responds to seeing their culture being performed and put on display. I don't know if this is true about Arabs, because I don't know much about the culture, admittedly. But I know in certain cultures, like Native Americans, for example, there are certain things that they want to keep secret and sacred within their tribe that they don't want performed in front of people who are outside of the tribe or outside of being a Native American, because it's part of their identity and they don't want to lose that and have it changed in any way by people who may not appreciate it the same way. So I guess I'd like to see maybe more about largely how the community feels about stuff like that. So I think it would be interesting if she did interviews even of like family members of hers, and kind of explained the work that she was doing and explained who she's researched so far, maybe show them snippets of what they've done so far and see what their reaction is to knowing and finding out that that stuff is out there. Because to be honest, I didn't even realize that we had Arab American authors or playwrights writing plays and performing them. And that even, as I read in that interview, that this Betty Samia, dang it, I hope I'm not screwing up her name, is so acclaimed, that she's, won a few awards, and that she's actually pretty popular playwright, because I've never heard her name before. I mean, truthfully, I don't really look up plays as much as I probably should being in theater, but that being said, excuse me. Anyway, and then as far as I could tell, like personally to me, I'd like to see how this relates, Summer, to you and your passion. I'd like to see, like, why is this so important? I know you said that you're curious about your own culture and discovering more things about yourself, but I guess I'd like to see your big why. Like, why do you feel like now is the time that you should explore this? Or why do you feel like how is it changing you even now, learning all this new information? Like, what are you discovering about yourself? And, like, kind of how is this going on your journey? I think in theater, one of the big things that we are able to connect to when viewing a performance isn't just the text as it's being said, and it isn't just the work as it's being displayed, it's like the psychological and emotional impact. So I guess I'd like to see more of that. As of right now, it kind of reads more like a cut and dry paper, like this is why things are because they are. Um, I'd like to see more about like what your thoughts are and more of your like internal thought process, I guess, as you're discovering your work. Um, Again, that could just be me, but I like to see a personal connection and stuff when I'm looking at it. My brows are doing weird stuff. Sorry. I'm so hopped up on cold meds right now. It's not even funny. Um, okay. Next, you said, although you're in the process of trying to conduct interviews with some artists, is there another type of work that you would like to see besides that? I'd like to see like maybe NPR talks. When I was taking musical theater appreciation with Mary Anderson last year. My brain, I swear to you, was so foggy. When I was taking theater appreciation with Mary last semester, she had brought up a couple NPR talks about different performances that we had been looking at and different different, like she found one by Lin-Manuel Miranda, an interview about him where he talked about In the Heights and Hamilton, and it was interesting to hear like his journey as an artist. So if you could find anything like that on your artists so we could hear their voices and kind of hear how they speak about their work when interviewed one-on-one rather than just read it, I think that would be interesting. Or even if you could find an NPR talk about Arab American plays in general and why they're so important and why, I mean, obviously they're important because it's a diversity and it's something that isn't widely being shown. And again, learning about different cultures helps to get rid of ignorance and helps to get people to be more accepting of the different culture. Um, but yeah, if you could find something like NPR wise, just about anything pertaining to theater and what you're working on, even if it's just like one playwright or one show or an actor within that show, or even I know there was a pretty good NPR talk about the revival of West Side Story and how originally it was done, with the white cast and in English for a lot of it, and then how they did a revival and changed it and changed some of the songs that were supposed to be done by the Puerto Ricans to actually being in Spanish, which would have been their native tongue. And, maybe doing a compare contrast or even looking at that would be helpful to you, even though it's not about Arab Americanism, but being helpful so far as, showing an honest light on culture instead of just doing what a lot of people do, which is, displaying. Oh my gosh, I'm like so fuzzy. Um, Instead of, making fun of the culture. Like a lot of times you see like on The Simpsons or on other cultures like the funny accents or people working in gas stations, and that is what America sees Arabics as. So I'm, geez, I swear I'm screwing this up. Um, it would be interesting to see, or to talk about why it's so important that we get a truthful light shed on this culture and how we can shift the perspective of what, people who've been raised here think about different cultures. I think that would be really interesting. And it would be interesting to see more about the Arab American theater history. Like, when did these plays start first being produced? Is it something that happened because Arabs started migrating to the United States? Is it something that coincides like way back in history and it's been being produced like overseas and it was brought to the United States? Or like what brought about the creation of it, and what playwrights are the most important for the movement? Um, really thinking like, I guess, development of drama or theater history is kind of intriguing to me. Where are there similarities between, you know, today we see lots of similarities in modern shows like movies, TV shows, plays that go back to and remind us of, you know, the beginning of theater, kind of when the bacchanals were being produced for the god Dionysus. So it would be interesting to kind of see um, where this started, if there's any, like, in a theater timeline, if there's any connections to things that have been going on. And maybe give a summary of some of the things that you showed, like the YouTube video you showed on there about, oh geez, now I'm going to have to look on your page because I don't remember the name. Hekili, I think is how you say it. The YouTube video you showed, which you did mention that it was in Arabic. But maybe if you could do some kind of like summary of what it was a little bit more, and like maybe highlight some of the key phrases that make it stand out so that we can understand the material and sources as well as you do, since we are English speaking. And then number 3, you asked about, you said, should I show some specific examples from artists' work along with a summary of the findings, like I just said, and why? And I said, yes, you know, by viewing what you're viewing, even if it's just a small portion of what you're looking at. So, like, if you have this whole YouTube video, even if you just, like, maybe film a 30-second cut or somehow can edit it, or tell us, you know, here's the link, look at this mark to this mark, tell me what you think, or this is what it's translated as, and why it's significant, then it can give us a better idea of the impact and significance of each playwright and why their work is important and how it differs from or connects to works by other playwrights. So I think that's the biggest thing is, so you listed all of these Arab American playwrights. How are some of their works similar and how are they different, and why is it important that each individual person is kind of like in this scene? Like, why is it so important that about what they're bringing to the table? I mean, we can list tons of playwrights that are English speaking or British or what have you, whatever culture, and why their work is significant and why certain people differ from other people or how they're similar to other people. Like, for example, this, oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher her name again. Oh man, it's a long night. I'm so sorry. Betty Shamia mentions in her interview that she really enjoys Tony Kushner, who is the playwright of Angels in America, and Perestroika, which is Angels in America Part 2. And she discusses, you know, why she enjoys that so much. You know, if you could find out maybe even who some of these other artists, playwrights that they look up to are and why, it would be interesting to kind of see if there are any similarities in their works. And having that connection, you know, can help the works that they produce, you know, make a deeper impact with us. So that's for summer. I'll be back in a few with my thoughts on Kevin's work. Back. So, first off, I just want to apologize because I keep calling you Kevin, since that's what your email name says. But it looks like, according to your again, foggy brain, your website, that you prefer to go to by Jice. So I'm going to try and remember to call you Jice. I apologize if I forget and called you Kevin. I'm sorry. So that being said, Jice. So yeah, looking at Jice's work, I guess I kind of noticed a connection to mine in that you'll see I took a video earlier this week actually on my cell phone. I was walking um, from my car. Well, actually, I'll post it before this, so whatever. But you'll see, as you've seen in the video, because by now you will have seen it, I feel like definitely out of the three different capstone projects that we're working on, the theme is really voices and giving voice to the artist. So giving the voice to the artist and then trying to find a platform in which for that voice to be able to exist that isn't tainted, I guess would be a good word to use. Trying to find a platform for the artist to be able to voice either their concerns or their passion or their thoughts or feelings or work, that they feel comfortable with. And that, gives audiences an ability to hear that work and to for it to be thought provoking and meaningful. So that's kind of like where I am about how all of these intertwine. Um, that being said, looking at Jice's work, I guess one of the questions that I had that raised was I wondered if he's going to record a before and after of working with these different poets. Are you going to record them, performing the work before you start introducing the techniques, and then, record the final performance to see how their work has changed and, whether or not it's become more meaningful and maybe even ask them, following the performance, what techniques helped them the most, what exercises helped them the most, and what was most beneficial to them, so that, you can tailor the exercises and stuff that you'll be doing for the future to work with more poets. And then are you going to record a demonstration or, write down which techniques you're going to use? Are you going to use Chekhov or Stanislavski or certain exercises that, like improv exercises that we use, or, psychological gestures, or just a curiosity of what techniques you plan on using that you've learned here at Wayne State, and maybe even journal how they respond to them since they're unfamiliar with them. Did it give you a clearer understanding of the techniques by explaining them to these poets? I know that when I explained things to other people when I was, like a student assistant for Mary Copenhagen last year for the intro costuming class, that sometimes explaining the stitches to the students, like I knew what I was doing and I knew what the stitch was called, and in my head, like I knew what the purpose was, but by vocally having to explain to them how to execute it instead of just showing them, it gave me a deeper understanding of what I was doing and why I was doing it, and helped to cement it more into my brain and actually helped me to memorize it better. And to have that more like feeling in my bones, and have that, experience. So maybe learning if that helps you at all, and if that helps you to bring more of that and self-examine how you perform your poetry and perform. Oh my gosh, this brain and this cold, I swear. Whether or not this exercise helps you. I would like to see how what you're doing is affecting you. I think that would be cool. And then the poem, I'm guessing that the poem that you chose is the one that you listed on there, The Rebellion. But you didn't cite an author, so I was just wondering is it written by you? and it looks like you had said you were having all three artists perform the same work. What made you decide to go that way? Um, and how did you choose this poem out of all the poems you were looking at? I guess is another question. Out of the scenarios that you listed, I think the two that would be most beneficial to the artists would either be scenario number 4 or scenario number 2. Number 4 is where you listed 2 individual and 2 group workshops, and here's why. I think it would be good to have a one-on-one with your students before you start this process, and then have 2 group workshops, and then have a one-on-one before your final presentation. Or even go, one individual, one group, one individual, one group, so that the last thing they remember doing is with a group of people, so they do have that comfortability of, performing in front of a few people before they have to go into the public performance. Or scenario number 2, where you do 3 group workshops and 1 individual workshop. And I think in that scenario, it would be most beneficial to you to do, 2 group workshops, then the individual, and then the final group workshop. That way, like I said, you're still ending with them being with a group of people so that they're comfortable around it. But that also gives you time to give them individual feedback based on what you've seen and how you've seen them react and perform within the group. And here's why, kind of, I feel that way. So, obviously, I'm assuming you've taken acting 1, because pretty much all of us have to. I don't know what teacher you had, but I had Blair Anderson. And the way he kind of styled it was we did, 2, was it 2 monologues? No, 1 monologue and 2 group scenes. And with the monologues, you would go up, present your monologue, you would get feedback from your peers, feedback from Blair, and then you would go up a second time and perform it again. And he kind of graded you like based on your improvement and if you listened to what people had said and critiqued about, and if you could deliver it more in character, etc., etc. I think that it would be beneficial to you to have them do something similar, maybe to start off with performing the piece that you gave them in their own inflection, and then to work together to give feedback to one another to help them to improve it. So with that being said, I'm going to go to your questions. And your first question is, as of now, the poets performing the same poem. Should I stick with this or find different pieces for them to perform, and why? Personally, I think it would be more beneficial to you to have them perform different pieces of poetry. I totally get where you're going with having them perform the same piece and seeing how the inflection can change from one person to another. But that being said, if you're thinking about doing, that would work if you were doing one-on-one with these people and only doing the one-on-one and then the group performance. But since you are doing group exercises and you kind of want to focus on the group exercises as well, I think it would be more beneficial to have separate poems for each of them, because when you are getting feedback from your peers about a piece, sometimes unknowingly you tend to kind of steal their ideas and input them into your own work. And when you see the work in that new light, I'm worried that, like say you perform something and I gave you a comment on it, then you would be like, oh, that's a really good comment, I should change this. Well, if I already had that comment and we were performing the same thing and I saw your take on it, I might take what you did and put into mine, and they might be closer to being similar, if that makes sense. And while that would be interesting to see as an artist, I think given what you're trying to do, it would be less beneficial to the artists, and it would be less interesting to an audience to watch three people perform the same piece. Um, you know, so that's just how I feel. Uh, I think that recording all of this is going to be really beneficial to you, with a video source. Even if you just use your phone from your camera, I think it will be really interesting to see how the physicality of the poets change from day one to day three. When you first go up to perform a monologue, it can be very daunting, from the first time, like, even from the first time doing like generals, you can be a little bit more stiff. And then the more you work with the actors and directors and people within the university, the more comfortable you become and more grounded you become in your performance, and it changes, by the last time you do your generals and the next time and so on. So I think it would be interesting to see how they would change, from day one to performance time. So recording it, I think, would definitely be beneficial for them and you, and especially for them, because seeing how you react as actors, I think it's important to see how your body moves, because when you're standing in front of a mirror, you tend to downplay some of the things that you do because you're looking directly at yourself. You don't notice, or you change and erase, odd behaviors. For example, right now, I noticed I'm doing a lot of weird things with my eyebrows and my hands, and I'm recording it. And if I look back at this later, I'll be like, what the hell was I thinking? Why am I doing so many weird things with my hands? Whereas if I'm in a mirror, I would just be like, oh, I should put these down now. So I think that recording it and seeing how they perform, without realizing their physicality, could be beneficial to them and beneficial to you, to give them suggestions on how to improve it and to review that work as your project and your research goes on. Uh, Again, I think performing three different works would be more beneficial because of the feedback that they could get. I think that definitely doing the whole, group workshops is going to be beneficial to them, because I think, there's only so much you can get from whoever is mentoring you. And that's not to say that you aren't qualified, because I'm sure that you are. It's to say that everyone has a different viewpoint and perspective of the world, and it's interesting and more beneficial to get those different perspectives. I know that some of the comments that have been most beneficial to me in working on things in my acting 1 class, and even now in my musical theater performance class, have been comments that are given to me by my peers, that know the shows that I'm working on, or know the piece of work that I'm working on, and know, the history of it, and or even know me and my odd quirks and how I'm infusing a character or a persona with them, and help snap me back into reality of, no, this is not me as them, this is me being them. Uh, so I think that's important to note as well with poetry, is that you talk about, performing these poems, and I understand what you're saying about performing the poems and hearing different voices and inflections, and that's interesting. Like when you think about seeing a famous work, uh, or a famous show, such as, oh geez, I can't even think of an example right now. Such as like The Sound of Music, and how that classic role by Julie Andrews is just so phenomenal. And then you see other people acting in the same role, and they're bringing something different. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It can be interesting. But I think the thing to keep in mind is, when you're thinking about using the same poem, is while it's interesting, ultimately, to do truth to the poem, you want to perform it the way you believe the poet has written it. and not with a different artistic voice, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts and feelings on that question. So I'm going to try and go to the next one because I realize now that this video is going to be ridiculously long, and I apologize in advance, Mary, because my brain is like super foggy and the nose and the stuff. Yeah. So I'm going to stop talking about it. So you next ask Jice, you say, the poets I'm working with have never performed in front of an audience. What kind of audience would you suggest? Honestly, I think an audience of your peers. If they've never performed in front of people before, I think there could be no better people to organize than, seeing if you can rent out a space like the Studio Theater. And I have experience with that. Just talk to Allison McCall. She's in the second floor dance or theater and dance studio, like computer lab workshop thing. And she can help you out with getting the space. It's super easy. There's a lot of free time that it's not being used, especially since I don't believe they're doing another show down there until Stop Kiss, and I'm not really sure when they go into tech, but yeah. I'm not sure when they're finished either, but I'm sure you could find time. And if not there, definitely look into getting the studio rehearsal space or something. But I think if you post out something on the call board and be like, hey, I'm doing this capstone project, I know I would love to attend, and I'm sure Summer and Mary would love to be there. And I think if you, do it with a jury of your peers, they could critique you on, different exercises that you could use that would be beneficial. They could give welcome feedback to the poets that you're working with, and they would definitely give constructive criticisms, especially if you mentioned that they've never performed their work before and this is an original performance for them. People would be very supportive within our theater community in the department, and within the students, because we know how nerve-wracking it can be to do something like that for the first time in front of a bunch of people. It can be very scary. So I feel like if you worked with someone in the school and you sent something out on the call board, that definitely people would show up, and definitely people would be kind, and you could let them know, listen, there's nobody like crazy famous or anything. Ask them to invite someone, a friend or family member that they feel comfortable with, or a couple friends or family members. Tell them, hey, I'm performing. I've never done this before. And when they see someone in the crowd that they're comfortable with, it'll make them more comfortable. Maybe you can give them the exercise and tell them to envision that they are performing it to them. Maybe even after you're doing your exercises, you can suggest that they practice performing it in front of them. So those are just some ideas. And then the third question you asked is, if I had to attend a show that was completely comprised of poetry, what kind of work would you like to see? Well, first off, I actually love spoken word poetry. I pretty much love all poetry, to be honest. There's not really any that I don't particularly like. But if I was going to see a show that was just poetry, I kind of like to see a variety. Maybe think of some kind of overlying theme, like a bigger theme, like maybe make it all about love, or all about school, or changes, or voices. I think that voice thing is really coming into play with the work that the three of us are doing. And, make it about the voice of each person. Maybe even ask the poets that you're working with to pick a piece that speaks to them, and following the performance, maybe they could discuss why it spoke to them and share something that they have written and why they haven't shared it yet, or how it's similar to what they're working on with you for this group performance. I'm sorry, one second. I swear this is going to be the death of me. That being said, yeah, I mean, I would just I would just maybe do a small variety, nothing too big. I tend to, when I look at up spoken word poems, I tend to look up things that are relevant to me or things that I want to learn more about, um, or things that I like hearing an opinion on. I'm like kind of going all over the place now, but one of the things that I search most for when I'm looking up spoken word poetry is religious spoken word poems, because I feel like there's a lot that can be read into with the Bible, and that there's a lot of similarities from the stories of the Bible that can be shown in experiences that I personally have had and things that I see being done now today. Um, but I'm digressing. I don't know. The short the short answer is I can't tell you what to do. I would watch pretty much anything, as long as it's got a pretty good vibe to it, or even a bad vibe. I like things that are thought provoking, really. As far as spoken word poems go, I like things that incorporate wordplay, which is kind of what spoken word poetry is about, but not always necessarily. Um, and I prefer to see things that have a truth and like a personal influence, like this speaks to me because I wrote this because um, of such and such in my life, or something that happened to me, or something that I witnessed. I like seeing things with a personal connection or history. So, with all of that being said, and the questions I answered for Jice and Summer, what do I think about my own work? Again, I'm so sorry, Mary, for making this video so long. Basically, what I think about my own work is it's given me a lot to think about. Um, it makes me want to do more research on what questions I'm asking people. I'm doing another set of interviews tomorrow, and oh man, I'm hoping that I get more responses, because right now I just have 4 people signed up, which is kind of scary. I hope I get more than 4 people, since I have like another 16 slots to fill. So I'm hoping I can get like at least 10. So if you know of a professor who might want to help, or a couple professors, I would really love to get some professor input for this project. But really, I guess what it's kind of made me think of is just like hidden truths, and uncovering things and going deeper into the surface. Uh, looking at Joyce's work and seeing the words, and it's the thing about spoken poetry is, I believe I heard this once described this way, and I believe it's true. What is spoken word poetry? Spoken word poetry is poetry that demands to be read aloud or performed aloud. You can't just read it in a page, and I think that's true. And thinking about that, and thinking about how it demands to be more than what it is on the surface, it makes me think about the theater department and how the students kind of want more and are kind of silently demanding more of the department and of the program that they are currently in, but are having a hard time fighting their way off the page. And so I'm hoping that my project is a means to voice that and to perform that, while being as truthful as possible and while being as respectful as possible, so that we don't all get in trouble. And looking at Summer's work, it's making me think that, I'm sorry, I'm looking down a lot. Looking at Summer's work, it's making me think that it's very important to give a voice to those that don't have one, or that we don't often think about. I think that in a university like ours, with several different colleges, College of Nursing, College of Education, College of Fine Performing Communication Arts, and several different departments within the colleges, it is easy to get lost. And I think that currently our department has lost its vision on helping its students. It, in my opinion, puts on a facade saying that it's there for the students, but in actuality, it feels as though the students are undermined and that the real, foothold and the real presence in the department, what everything is focused on is the productions that we put on. And while the productions are a means of gaining education through performance and through experience, I believe that they've been pushed so far to the forefront that the students have been pushed all the way to the back. Through budgets, uh, other things that the department offers through cuts and classes and everything else, the students have kind of been pushed all the way to the back to the point where it seems as though we're not even being considered for most of the decisions that are being made. It's almost like, so we're all adults, obviously. We're all in college. I don't think there's a single student in our department that's under the age of 18, which means we're all legal. And can legally make our own decisions and take responsibility for those decisions. That being said, it feels almost like we're children again. And like the department downplays us and makes a lot of decisions for us without consulting us, like a parent would, which is insulting considering the fact that we are paying them and considering the fact that they wouldn't have the ability to make these decisions without our tuition money and without the funds that they've received from the university because of our tuition. And so it just makes me want to bring this voice to light even more. And it just makes me feel like I have a lot of digging to do, and I have a lot of thought that I need to put into this project and how I'm going to spin it so that it doesn't look like I'm a child talking back to a parent, but rather it looks like an informed decision and an informed and educated student trying to kind of almost reach out an olive branch and say, hey, can we call a summit in which we can discuss everything that's going on so that the students can become more involved in the politics of the department, and so that the politics of the department and the people in charge of the politics of the department can become more involved with the individualities of their students. Because as of right now, as I said earlier in the video, it seems more as though they're treating us as a whole rather than, treating us all individually. And the thing is this. I believe our department has a sickness right now. And as of right now, it seems like they are trying to treat the problem as a whole and cover it up as a whole and, fix it all, shine it all up as a whole, rather than look at all the underlying symptoms and try and see what's causing it. There's been like I guess to speak in medical terms, it's as though our department has issued a diagnosis for what's wrong with it. And they're taking that diagnosis at face value and saying, okay, well, we know this will kind of cure treat the symptoms of the diagnosis, but it's not actually going to cure it. But it'll make you feel better, kind of, or it'll cover it up and hide the pain a little bit so it won't be as noticeable. Whereas really they need to dig deep and deep and deep to find out what exactly is causing everything that's going wrong, what exactly is going wrong, and how to fix each little problem individually, I guess is where I'm going with this. That metaphor kind of like got away from me. Again, fog, sick brain. Yeah, I don't know anymore. I think my meds have kicked in and I'm done. I'm so sorry, Mary. And Summer and Jice, damn it, who are watching this. I'm so sorry. Uh, so yeah, thoughts on my project is just trying to figure out how I can show all of that as a whole without it being like this is an almost hour or hour plus video. Uh, Something that won't take up a whole lot of time, but that can get the point across and can demonstrate, you know, what's really going on. I guess now, originally when I decided I wanted to do this project, I was hoping to come up with a plan. But time-wise, I don't think that that's really going to be feasible. So I think instead it's going to be more like an expose on the department. And hopefully it's going to be like an awareness campaign. Like, hey, we the students matter. Please pay attention to us. This is how we feel. Let's try and find something to do about it. So those are my thoughts. And hopefully I can get some decent work done with the editing on my video this week. And my hope is to have a small snippet of something to show you guys for next week. Because I'm going to try and wrap up this filming tomorrow. So, thanks.